The Congo is one of the most resource-rich nations on Earth. These are rubber vines and they grow wild here in the rainforest. It's used in manufacturing, cars, bike tires. Congo also has a lot of timber, dense tropical hardwood. It has gold. It has cobalt. It produces 70% of the world's cobalt, which is needed for lithium-ion batteries in your phone. This guy's mining uranium. There's diamonds, coltan, which is crucial in capacitors for phones and laptops. And there's oil. It's also the second largest rainforest on Earth, which is crucial for climate regulation and carbon capture, but is being logged and stripped of its natural resources. Here's a map of all Congo's riches, and here's a map of all its mines. The Congo River is 4,700 kilometers long. It is a major trade and transport artery for the continent of Africa. It links forests to kingdoms to colonial shipping routes. Colonization of Congo started in 1482 when this guy found the river and made contact with the Kingdom of Congo. Kingdom of Congo was one of the most powerful states in pre-colonial Africa. Kingdom of Congo had its own bureaucracy, its own taxation systems, and a really healthy economy based on agriculture. They used iron tools, built long-distance trading networks, and had diverse spiritual systems. Between the 1400s and the 1600s, Portuguese destabilized Congo. They started to force conversions to Christianity and raid to steal slaves. Between the 1500s and the 1800s, the transatlantic slave trade destabilized, weakened, and militarized Congo. By the 1800s, many internal kingdoms were extremely weak, but they had not yet collapsed. They were still ruling, still trading, still negotiating with Europeans. Congo is hard to control. The terrain is extremely difficult. You are up against thick equatorial rainforest, swampy lowlands, and this massive, massive river, which is full of rapids. Lazy colonists like Britain and France prefer to dominate in areas where they can control the terrain. They would go for places where you just have quick access to ports. Just get the extraction happening quickly was key for the British. So up until the 1800s, most colonial activity by the Europeans stayed near the coasts. The British were in Ghana on the Gold Coast. The French were in Senegal, because their main goal was slave trade, port control, and access to the Indian Ocean. To go deep into the African interior was seen by colonizers as a mad thing to do. It was so dangerous, completely unmapped, and just not really worth it. This is King Leopold. He wanted to make Belgium an imperial power like Britain or France. Belgium had just become independent from the Netherlands, and it had no colonies. First he tried to buy land in China, and they said no. Then he tried in the Philippines. Everyone kept saying no to Leo. Then he turned to Africa, but not through the Belgian government. Leo had his own private plan. So in 1876, he founded something called the International African Association. This was a humanitarian shield. Leo told Europeans that this was to promote exploration and science. See, he was going to help civilize Africa. He said he was going to map the geography of Central Africa and document its flora. He presented himself as a philanthropist. Through this front organisation, he got access to donations and diplomatic trust without involving the Belgian state. The IAA allowed Leopold to mask his land grab, but behind the scenes he quietly sets up a private commercial company. Comité d'études du Congo was his land acquisition machine, not accountable to Belgium. In 1885, Leopold is officially recognised as sovereign over the Congo Free State. It's not Belgian, it's his. He was king of Belgium, yes, but he acted privately. The Congo Free State was financed by private capital, and he was backed by major European interests. This wasn't the whim of a deranged king. This was a structured investment project. In 1887, Dunlop invents the bicycle tyre. Then came the global bicycle boom in Europe and America. European markets couldn't keep up with demand. Congo's wild rubber went from a niche export to the centre of Leopold's business model. No need to plant, manage, or grow the rubber. Simply send workers in to collect it. Entire villages were ordered to meet monthly rubber quotas. Men were forced to go deep into the jungle, sometimes for weeks, with no tools or protective clothing. and if they failed to meet the quotas, their women were taken hostage and people were killed. Workers cut into the vines to let the latex sap seep out. The colonizers didn't even give them buckets or containers. They would have to let it dry on their skin, on their arms and on their torsos, and after hours it hardened to a crust. They would then scrape it off with knives or sharp tools, ripping off the skin and the body hair. No gloves, no soap, and many people developed infections and were left with permanent scarring. Soldiers of the Force Publique, Leopold's private army, would routinely cut off people's hands if they failed to meet the rubber quotas. The soldiers employed by Leopold also had their own bullet quotas. They would have to bring back a severed hand as evidence for the bullet used. Hands were counted and logged. If villages didn't meet rubber quotas, people were whipped, hostages were taken, and people were killed. Société Générale de Belgique is Belgium's most powerful bank, held stakes in mining, railways, and rubber plantations. Backed Leopold's legitimacy. Very interested in the untapped potential of the Congo resources. Baron Alphonse de Rothschild backed Leopold early because he believed copper, gold, and tin deposits in Congo would become profitable. Rothschild's investment wasn't in rubber. It was in the future mining capability of the Congo. Ferdinand de Lesseps was the engineer of the Suez Canal, a global celebrity of infrastructure, extremely interested in the Congo basin. Pitched the Congo as Africa's Suez. Elder Dempster were a major British shipping firm that dominated the West Africa to Europe shipping routes and handled the freight between the Congo River, Liverpool, and Antwerp. Elder Dempster carried Leopold's blood rubber into European markets while presenting itself as neutral transporters. Lloyd's of London is an insurance house. It provides marine insurance for ships and cargo. Lloyd's underwriters helped make Leopold's extraction model viable by de-risking the transport of rubber and ivory from the African West Coast. Without Lloyd's, nobody would have moved Leopold's cargo. SGB, the bank that bankrolled Leopold, invested directly in rubber concession companies like ABI-OR. In 1908, Belgium formally annexes Congo from Leopold, but SGB retain and expand the control of assets, now under the legal protection of the Belgian state. Société Générale de Belgique was the backbone of colonial finance, Belgium's most dominant bank. Union Minière de Haute-Katanga, Upper Katanga Mining Union, started mining in Congo in the early 1900s for tin, cobalt, uranium, radium, zinc, silver, gold, magnesium. SGB also held major stakes in Fourminière, which was diamonds. In the 1960s, this company controlled over 60% of the global cobalt production. Its annual revenues are estimated at about $2 billion a year, and its uranium is fueling the Manhattan Project. The governance of Belgium was outlined in the 1908 Colonial Charter, which established a paternalistic regime where the church, the state, and the corporations were instructed to oversee the welfare of the inhabitants. This was primarily a public relations exercise, and the extraction model has continued largely unchanged. Rubber concessions eventually ended their operations due to falling commodity price, but UMHK consolidated its position as the Congo's dominant economic force, with SGB as its controlling stakeholder. By the late 1950s, anti-colonial pressure is building across Africa, and Belgium's hold on Congo is cracking. Urban protests are erupting across Leopoldville, which is called Kinshasa, the city. And the Belgian elite are afraid that if they delay independence any longer, there'll be global pressure. So they announce a sudden transition. But it was not a plan for real independence. This was a rushed exit to protect Belgian interests. before the structure collapsed. In January 1959, riots are met with gunfire, and in January 1960, roundtable talks between Brussels and Congolese leadership. By June 1960, Congo is declared an independent republic. The timeline from colonized to independent is literally 5 months. No civil training, no national institutions, no military. By 1960, only 3 Congolese people held administrative roles in their own government. Out of upwards of 5,000 civil service leaders, less than 100 were Congolese. And when Belgian officials began leaving en masse, they left a hollow shell of a government. The force publique had no Congolese officers above a sergeant. They had been trained to follow, never lead. No independent legal system existed. Courts were run through Belgian law and Belgian judges. And so independence left them with no way to enforce law, no way to resolve disputes, no way to check power. Congo didn't control its own money. The currency is printed in Brussels. The foreign reserve is held in Belgian and French banks. At independence in 1960, the country had less than 30 Congolese university graduates. The schools were left being run by missionaries, the church, and they were deliberately blocked from higher education. That is what they walked out on when they declared independence, but they never left. The key companies stayed operational. UMHK went on mining. This is Katanga. It's the Congo's resource core. It's where all the minerals are. And most of it was controlled by UMHK. Losing Katanga meant the newly independent Congolese state lost its economic engine before it even started. Just 11 days after independence, Chumbi, backed by Belgian mining and political elites, announces separation from Congo. Belgian banks were very afraid that Lumumba would nationalize the mines. Patrice Lumumba was the first Prime Minister of the Republic of Congo, and he was assassinated brutally by the West. Lumumba was articulate, strategic, and radically committed to real sovereignty for Congo. Before becoming Prime Minister of Congo, Lumumba had been a postal clerk, a beer salesman, and a self-educated nationalist. Under Belgian rule, Congolese people had almost no access to real education. The Belgians had deliberately designed an education system that limited black knowledge, just basic literacy and obedience. They called them the évolué, which meant a black person evolved enough to mimic Europeans, but still seen as inferior. If a Congolese person learned French, converted to Christianity, and dressed European, they could earn the title of évolué. As a postal worker, Lumumba was seen as an évolué, but he used the system against them. He learned French to read revolutionary ideas. He learned the bureaucracy to understand the colonial power structures. He flipped the colonial schooling from a trap to a weapon. Lumumba read everything he could. He read French Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Rousseau, and he read African and Pan-African writers. He read the work of Kwame Nkrumah and Leopold Sédar Senghor. He taught himself French fluently, which was a huge deal at the time, as it gave him access to political ideas that the Belgians never meant for Congolese to read. He used libraries and he bought all the books he could. In a system designed to make him an obedient clerk, he taught himself to become a revolutionary. His time as a postal clerk gave him access to international news. It gave him exposure to political debates, and it enabled him to connect with other Congolese thinkers. He joined cultural associations and debate clubs. Officially, these clubs were about literature and art, but unofficially they were about debating politics and liberation. He kept practicing his public speaking. He kept trying to organize meetings, trying to sharpen his argument against the colonists. He helped found several pro-independence groups before Congo even had political parties. Unlike other African leaders who had gone to the West to be educated, Lumumba's education came from the streets, from the fields. He was not trained by European professors. He was trained by ordinary Congolese people. He was radicalized by the brutality that he was witnessing firsthand in Congo. It made him fearless. He knew exactly what he was fighting for. He was not a communist. He was a Pan-African nationalist. He wanted Congo for Congolese people. He spoke truth to power. This is King Baudouin of Belgium. On the 30th of June 1960, King gave an extremely patronising and imperial speech. He praised the genius of King Leopold, the man who'd orchestrated the mass murdering of 10 million people. He called Congo's independence a gift from Belgium, and he urged Congolese people to respect Belgian settlers, basically saying, we gave you freedom, don't fuck it up. Lumumba wasn't even scheduled to speak that day. This is Patrice with Joseph Kasavubu. Joseph was supposed to speak, but when Patrice heard what the colonizer said, he could not help himself. He stood up, looked the king directly in his eyes, and delivered one of the most legendary speeches in decolonial history.
Les ironies, les insultes, les coups que nous devions subir matin, midi et soir, parce que nous étions des nègres. Qui oubliera qu'à un noir, on disait tu, non certes comme à un ami, mais parce qu'un vous honorable était réservé pour ceux de blanc. Il n'y a pas de souffert à notre corps, dans notre expérience familiale. Souvenez-vous du corps, cela est une honnête.
This was Lumumba telling the Western world directly that Belgian colonialism was not civilizing Africa. It was violence and racism and theft. He slaps down the lie that Belgium was gifting independence to Congo. He says, we fought for this, we've suffered for it, we've been paying in our blood. He closes this speech by saying, together we shall establish social justice and ensure for everyone a fair remuneration for their labour. We shall show the world what the black man can do. Through his eloquent speeches, Lumumba planted the flag of dignity, not just for Congo, but for all colonized people who were watching him. The Congo isn't just some random colony. It is the richest place on earth. It is the Congo that powers the modern world. Uranium from the Congo fueled the Manhattan Project. Cobalt from the Congo is still used in the manufacturing of your film that you're looking at. If you're watching me, you owe a Congolese person. This is Katanga, the mineral-dense core, the economic engine of Congo. Before independence, this region was already split between Belgian, US and British multinational companies, UMHK being the largest. Lumumba wanted real sovereignty. He wanted wealth distribution. He wanted to end the exploitative violence. He wanted the West to stop bleeding Congo dry. Lumumba didn't want fake independence. He didn't want to swap one colonial master for another. He wanted real sovereignty, real control of Congolese land by Congolese people. He was fighting for a world where Congolese workers are paid a fair wage, where the wealth from the sale of their mining materials stayed in the country, didn't flow off into offshore bank accounts. He dreamed of a Congo that could rise, invent, build, lead. You can have your iPhone without needing to put Congolese men in chains. I share Lumumba's dream of a world where our tech is not built on blood cobalt, but on liberated sovereign economies. Pay the Congolese man! If Congo had kept its wealth, we would probably have real-life Wakanda by now. Colonialism does not speed up innovation. It slows it down. Hoarding the wealth of another country in an offshore bank account does not help build a new world. It just feeds old empires. So what did the West do when Lumumba said no to being a puppet, when he couldn't be bought? Within weeks of Congolese independence, they were plotting against him. This is Joseph Mobutu. The CIA paid this man to stage a coup. That speech I showed you was on 30th of June. By July, Belgium, the US and Britain were actively discussing how to remove him. Dulles was the CIA director. He ordered the CIA station chief in Congo, Larry Devlin, to eliminate Lumumba. This is Daphne Park. She was an MI6 officer in Congo at the time. And in later interviews, she admitted that Britain seen Lumumba as too independent and supported moves by the Americans too. This is Moe Tshombe. He was a wealthy businessman from the Katanga province, this mineral-rich core. Educated by Christian ministries, this guy was super loyal to Belgian colonial structures. He wanted to keep Western money flowing into his own greedy pockets. He was paid by this mining company, a puppet bought and paid for by the Belgians. Just 11 days after Congolese independence, Tshombe's Katanga secedes, or declares its own independence from Congo. And Belgium lands paratroopers, claiming it has to protect civilians from this internal chaos that it caused. The CIA and the MI6 then block the UN from any intervention. They use Cold War politics as a shield, claiming that Lumumba was a communist allied with Russia, and they position Tshombe as a moderate leader. They do this deliberately because a broken and chaotic Congo was better for Western corporate interests. Lumumba's speech to the West was in June. By September, this man, Mobutu, launches a CIA-backed coup. Lumumba is captured. So June 1960, Congo is declared an independent republic. But by September, the CIA have organized a coup. And this guy, Mobutu, who was paid a stinking amount of money by the CIA and the Belgians, launches his peaceful coup. He pretends he's saving national unity, but in reality, he was a Western puppet. Lumumba is stripped of his prime ministerial authority and put on house arrest. The West hoped to keep him silent without making him a martyr, so they didn't actually want him dead, because then he becomes a saint. But in November, he escapes his house arrest. He planned to travel to East Congo, where his supporters still controlled the region, and set up a rival government. Mobutu's forces chase him. Along the way, Lumumba is betrayed by local rivals. Mobutu's troops recapture him near the Sankuru River. This time he is arrested not as a prime minister, but as a criminal. After capture, Mobutu's forces parade Lumumba in chains through the streets of Leopoldville. He was beaten publicly, mocked, and photographed. Images of him bound and bleeding were released deliberately to humiliate him, to break his image as a proud national leader, and to send a message to Congolese people. Resistance will be crushed. As the new president of Congo, Mobutu did not want Lumumba's blood on his hands, so he secretly arranges for Lumumba to be transferred to Katanga, where Tshombe and his Belgian backers took care of the rest. On January 17, 1961, Lumumba arrives in Katanga. First, he is beaten viciously. Then he and his two friends, Joseph and Maurice, are thrown into a makeshift holding cell where they were repeatedly tortured. Constant beatings, electrical torture, deliberate starvation, forcing them to stand for hours. Witness accounts and later Belgian confessionals admit that they stripped and bound these men. Guards urinated on them. They had broken ribs, crushed fingers, internal bleeding. They were denied food or water. They were constantly mocked. They told them they were going to be fed to wild animals. Belgian officers even posed for photographs, treating their torture like sport. After hours of this brutal torture, they drive the three men out into the bush near this tiny village, Mitwaba, and they execute them by firing squad. Lumumba was shot last after he had to witness the deaths of both his friends. Belgian officials knew that these murders were illegal under international law, and they didn't want a body that could be found, photographed, or used as proof against them. So they dismember him and dissolve the body in acid. But they keep his gold tooth as a trophy. Acid made it easier to deny. No body, no crime. A grave or a funeral could become a rallying point for Congolese people. The West's biggest fear was that Lumumba would become a martyr. They believed that if there's no body, no funeral, no sacred site, then it will be harder for other resistance movements to gather around his memory. But this is where he was killed. And there is a memorial site here. Dissolving his body was not the smartest of strategies. This is the man who did it. He kept Lumumba's tooth, and when asked about it years later, he said, "I cut up and dissolved his body in acid. The hardest part was cutting him to pieces. There was almost nothing left, only a few teeth, and the smell. I washed 3 times and always felt like a barbarian dirty." Even when confessing, these men showed no remorse. They acted like panicked, vicious cowards, so threatened by one black leader's dignity that they couldn't even stand the idea of his corpse existing. It wasn't erasure, it was confession. It showed the world, and it still shows the world, that Western corporations are so morally bankrupt and so afraid of African sovereignty that they literally thought that acid and lies could kill the dream. It did not work. Lumumba did not die a tragic victim. He was murdered by imperial cowards who knew that he had already won the moral battle. They killed him because they could never defeat him. And we know who killed him: the Belgian government, the CIA, MI6, UMHK. Here is the list of names. The people who murdered Patrice Lumumba. When colonizers can't silence your voice, they try to destroy your body. If they can't destroy your body, they try to erase your memory. If they can't erase your memory, they try to rewrite your story. And if they can't rewrite your story, they bury it under lies. But when that all fails, like it's failing now, they have no answer left. And so we remember Patrice Lumumba. This is a letter he wrote to his wife from prison. "My dear wife, I am writing these words to you, not knowing whether they will reach you or whether I shall be alive when you read them. Throughout my struggle for independence of our country, I have never doubted the victory of our sacred cause, to which I and my comrades have dedicated all of our lives. But the only thing which we wanted for our country is the right to live a worthy life, to dignity without pretense, to independence without restrictions. This was never the desire of the Belgian colonists and their Western allies, who received direct or indirect, open or concealed support from some highly placed officials of the United Nations, the body upon which we placed all of our hope and when we appealed to it for help. They seduced some of our compatriots, bought others, and did everything to distort the truth and smear our independence. What I can say is this: alive or dead, free or in jail, it is not a question of me personally. The main thing is the Congo, our unhappy people, whose independence is being trampled on. That is why they have shut us away in prison and why they keep us far away from the people. But my faith remains indestructible. I know and feel in my heart that sooner or later my people will rid themselves of their internal and external enemies, that they will rise up as one in order to say no to colonialism, to brazen, dying colonialism, in order to win their dignity in a clean land. We are not alone. Africa, Asia, the free peoples, and the peoples fighting for their freedom in all corners of the world will always be side by side with the millions of Congolese who will not give up the struggle while there is even one colonist or one colonist mercenary in our country. To my sons, who I am leaving and whom perhaps I shall not see again, I want to say that the future of the Congo is splendid, and that I expect from them, as from every Congolese, the fulfillment of the sacred task of restoring our identity and our sovereignty. Without dignity there is no freedom, without justice there is no dignity, and without independence there are no free men. Cruelty, insults, and torture can never force me to ask for mercy, because I prefer to die with head high, with indestructible faith and profound belief in the destiny of our country, than to live in humility and renounce the principles which are sacred to me. The day will come when history will speak, but it will not be the history which will be taught in Brussels, Paris, Washington, or the United Nations. It will be the history which will be taught in the countries which have won freedom from colonialism and its puppets. Africa will write its own history, and in both North and South it will be a history of glory and dignity. Do not weep for me. I know that my tormented country will be able to defend its freedom and its independence. Long live the Congo, long live Africa. The Congo was colonized by Belgium under King Leopold II as his personal slave plantation. At least 10 million Congolese people were killed during Leopold's rubber and ivory regime of terror. amputations, mutilations, mass executions. Belgium later turned Congo into a corporate colony managed for mineral extraction: copper, gold, diamonds, cobalt, uranium. Modern Congo was designed purely for Western profit. On the 30th of June 1960, Congo gains independence, but the real economy, military command, education, and administration remained under Belgian control. Patrice Lumumba, elected first Prime Minister, sought economic independence. He demanded the return of Congolese resources from Western governments and companies. Katanga is the extraction core of Congo, and 11 days after independence, this region declares its independence. The CIA and MI6 label Lumumba as a threat and orchestrate his arrest, torture, and execution, and the dissolving of his body in acid. Then they pretend it's about communism, but it was always about resource extraction control. After the coup, Joseph Mobutu seizes control with direct CIA funding and renames the Congo Zaire. For the next 32 years, Congo is run as a kleptocracy. He's a dictator, and he stole billions while the population remained impoverished. He was there to protect Western mining interests, and he guaranteed them cheap access. The Cold War was used as cover to maintain Western corporate access to Africa's resources. And they did this in Congo through Mobutu's brutality. Mobutu served the West loyalty for decades, but by 1997 he's becoming too erratic. He can no longer guarantee them safe extraction. He's lost control of East Congo. Throughout the Cold War, Mobutu's main advantage was that he was positioned as anti-communist. With the collapsing of the Soviet Union in 1991, he lost his strategic interest for the West, as their focus shifts to neoliberalism. Mobutu was an old-fashioned kleptocrat. Now the West wanted technocrat states. Still controlled, but it's a cleaner look for the empire. Many mining contracts under Mobutu were tied to his personal networks. The West wanted direct contracts with new liberated governments. They wanted to pull them into IMF control, reform conditions like access without the middlemen. Don't need you anymore. This is Laurent Désiré de Kabila, an old leftist rebel leader. He gets support from Western puppet governments in Rwanda and Uganda to march across Congo and overthrow Mobutu. But it's not just Uganda and Rwanda who support him, it's the United States government. It's the World Bank, it's the IMF, it's the British in Rwanda, and it's Western mining companies. Aligning him with neighbouring African nations and aligning him with leftist visions gave the Western operation a clean house to reopen Congo mines for looting. Roger Winter, former USAID director, admitted in testimony before the US Congress that he supported Rwanda's invasion. American mineral fields, now called Adastra Minerals, hosted his forces in luxury hotels during the onslaught. UN Security Council reports from 2002 and 2003 document Western companies' advanced preparations. But when he becomes president, Kabila kicks the Rwandan military out, orders foreign armies out, and announces new mining laws that favour the state over the corporations. The West now see their investment into this war as at risk. Getting him elected had been money down for mining companies. To survive without the West, Kabila sought new friends in China and Libya and Zimbabwe, Angola and Namibia. His goal was to decolonize Congo's economy. Kabila is initially framed as a revolutionary leader, but by late 1997, there's a shift to authoritarian language. The US State Department put out a human rights report, noting that he was arbitrarily arresting people. This report makes claims of killing and torture. The International Crisis Group labels his regime as a dictatorship. C-SPAN panels in late 1997 warn of a regional power keg. citing unresolved grievances between Tutsi and Hutu factions. The BBC starts warning of a new dictatorship in Africa. Fox News ran an entire segment about his human rights abuses, without a single shred of context for the war. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch published selective reports highlighting massacres by Kabila's regime while downplaying the atrocities being committed by the Western-backed rebels. He's then accused of suppressing dissent, restricting press freedom, and allowing this massacre of refugees. Abuses happen on all sides. The systematic extraction of Congo was already brutal. This Western reporting is deeply asymmetrical. Human rights language again being used to justify intervention for regime change, to reopen mineral access,